Welcome to Faith Fulcrum, a podcast in which Scott and Mark have conversations about faith, spirit, creativity, meaning, and almost anything else. We don't always agree, so you don't have to either. But we do agree that a good conversation sometimes makes a great song. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Scott. Glad to be back in the studio.
Yeah. It's great to be back in the studio. Hey, our guest this episode, is a good friend of mine. His name's Heath Johnson, and I'm going to let him introduce himself here in just a minute. I'm going to tell you just a little bit because he and I met probably, I think it was close to 8 to 10 years ago, something like that. Probably right around this time of year, because this time of year right now is actually Lent. And
that's right. Happy Lent.
Happy Lent.
It's also Ramadan. It's a really overlap of
There's
fastings.
A huge overlap of spiritual happenings right now. But when we met, I was invited. We had a mutual friend, but I was invited to join him. We're going to go through a thing called atheism for Lent, which was created. Yeah.
Going to give up God for Lent, sort of?
Exactly.
Excellent.
Well, it was created by a theologian philosopher named Pete Rollins, who's written a bunch of books. One that I think he had just written at that time and maybe spawned that Atheism for Lent was called Insurrection. And the subtitle, I pulled it up just so I could remember it. The subtitle was that's great. Oh, there it is. To believe is human, to doubt divine. So anyway, I think he's really all about opening up that opportunity to go anywhere, ask any question. One of the things that stood out to me the most that has impacted me was his statement. He really took Jesus' statement on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me, as a statement of atheism in the moment. God, where are you? You're gone. So, and I've known a lot of folks who have been on a journey who have said, if I can't at some point just say, I'm not so sure. I don't think he's there. They can't go to that point. They can't see clearly to sort through what they do believe, if you've got this kind of mental block of saying, I just can't go there. But anyway.
Yeah, somehow that's terrifying, I think, to some people of faith. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's been demonized for a long time. But I wasn't going to talk this long, but I did want to also say about Heath. We'll talk about him before we let him talk. He is a wonderful songwriter. He has been instrumental in getting a community of songwriters going here in this area, been central to that, which has been fantastic. He is also the director of the Matthews, which is not only our beautiful historic opera house, it's also a center for arts and all kinds of things. And so he's really got his finger on the pulse of a whole lot of great things. And I'm glad it's his finger because I know where his fingers have been. So it's fantastic. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about you, Heath. I'll let you talk about yourself. So.
Oh, yeah. I love doing that. I would say it was about, 8 to 10 years ago that we met. I moved up here to Spearfish in 2008 from Omaha. Grew up in Nebraska most of my life, and went to college to be a preacher. I was a head pastor in Iowa for 3 years, and before I moved up here, through all of that journey was where I stumbled onto Peter Rollins. This crazy pyro theologian from Belfast, Ireland, who's putting out these books and putting out these videos, and then he had this class, the Atheism for Lent, which, at first sound like you were saying, it sounds kind of insane, but when you dive into it, you start to realize, like, most of what atheists don't believe about God, I also don't believe about God. Yeah. There's a lot that we overlap on, and I think that was kind of the point, was you burn all of your dogma away, and you see what's left, and then if what's left is something that you think you can, rebuild a faith in, you try that. And then every so often you burn that down, and it's a constant pursuit of truth, test everything, right? And so that's what led to you and me meeting, because I knew a few people, and I think it was Eric Domkowski that actually knew you first. Yeah. And he pulled you in, and that's how we all got going.
You remember Luke?
Yeah, I forgot about Luke. That's right.
Luke was a good buddy of mine too. So yeah.
And it was right up my alley because I mean I'd been going through some struggles with my faith and with a lot of things around that time, and I think that's something that we always do. But at that time it was very I would say pointed to. I didn't really know what my outcome was really going to be yet at that time, and so that really put me on a path of, I wouldn't say destroy everything and start over, but it was more of a kind of like a fine-tuned. I felt like a surgeon would, when they dive in to fix something, they're not like cutting off the whole leg. They're getting rid of what needs to be gotten rid of and moving on forward from there. And that's really like a foundational, I think, point of just who I am as a person. Like I'm not a big believer in full destruction, especially in deconstruction of faith. I think there's value in knowing where to put your feet as you're reversing where you walked. And then figuring out where to go from there, once you find your path back. I mean, not to say some things don't require a sledgehammer, but I think there's a lot more that, require a scalpel. And that was a fun time in my life. I can't believe it's been that long ago. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I always say you can't fix a VCR with a hammer, which is a kind of outdated saying since nobody has a VCR. But it's true that there are approaches that are appropriate for the time. But I mean, I would have to say, just since we're talking about this stuff, I'm not one who believes in a lot of things. I don't have a lot of beliefs, but I'm open to a lot of things. A lot of possibilities present themselves to me, and it seems very likely that the world I'm living in is an artifact that's created by something.
Sure.
But I mean, I kind of stop at that point and ask, what is that? So what about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it's likely. It seems likely. And then what?
Yeah. I that's what led to me really following a lot of the discussions. I think it's is it J.T. Robinson, or it's the ground of being type of faith. So it's the idea that God is not above you. God is that from which all life springs forth from.
Yeah.
So the sustaining essence of all of existence. So it's you're standing more on God than you're looking up trying to reach God kind of thing. And that led to a lot of it. But I mean, that goes back to choosing to deconstruct with a scalpel for me, because I mean, I had a lot of friends that got burned hard by the church and by stuff like that. And man, they just blew everything up, and if they were conservative, they went as far liberal as they could. If they were fundamental, they fundamental Christian, for example, like they almost became their identity is now wrapped in their hatred towards Christianity.
Happy Lent in a borrowed season, Ramadan in the same thin air. Fast from certainty, feed the question, let the silence say you're not dead. A theologian strikes a matchstick to believe it's human, doubt divine. Lay your idols on the altar, watch the slogans lose their shine. If I can whisper, most of what the atheists leaving, I already left behind. Ashes drift where dogma stood, truth survives. drives the fire refined.
It was a reaction more than I really need to think this through. What exactly do I believe, and who do I want to be as a person? And and I look at them, most of them now, and it's sad to see where they are. They're not happy with their lives. They're, and I'm grateful that I didn't do that. I chose to go the long road, I guess.
Sure.
I never think that being unhappy with your life is somehow means that you've failed. I don't believe, for instance, that happiness is the point of human existence.
I'd agree.
If that's the case, then almost all of us are terrible, terrible failures. And and because we think that happiness is what we're supposed to be, happy is what we're supposed to be, so we get so many people kind of just pretending that what they have is and what they are is good enough.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. I think you got to also remember, too, that people have been hurt by Christian faith groups and other faith groups. And so they have a reason to be resentful, I think.
I think that brings up something that I was thinking about it in terms of what you shared, Heath. I think there are more than two sides, but there's a side of the deconstruction and the coming out of faith that is trauma-based. I mean, the abuse that's happened or the pain that you've experienced.
The
judgment. And that's the sort of thing that doesn't put you in a good place to use a scalpel. It puts you in a good place to use a broadsword, And so what happens, I think, quite often is, and it's easy. I mean, it's a very human thing to do. Mm-hmm. I merge together my trauma with my intellectual questioning, and they become one and the same, and it's all part of the same thing, and it's difficult to get out of that. It's a little bit like a scientist going into an experiment, feeling extremely biased about what needs to happen in this experiment. He's not going to see the data. He's not going to be able to clearly decide what's happening because he has already predetermined what very much needs to happen. And so a lot of folks that destroy themselves and everything around them, it really is a trauma reaction more so than that taking the scalpel to a belief system,
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. And I'm not saying that there weren't moments along the path where I didn't take that broadsword. I mean, I think the reaction is a part of the process. I think it's a part of the journey. I mean, there were years in my life that was just spent in trying to, destroy any type of faith concept that people could think of. I mean, I would say, I could destroy that. And let me break that down for you. It's like, once you see how the sausage is made, I can break everything down and show you like this is where they ended with that, right? Yeah. But I think the challenge is, going back to the reaction and feeling happy, all of these emotions that come into play. The challenge is to keep going and realize that, like happiness is a great example. Like you brought up, Mark, it's not something that doesn't mean we've failed if we're not happy. But I think there's something to be said about going a bit deeper in contentment is really the underlying, I think, attribute we're trying to reach. as people is being at peace with who we are, with whatever our story has become, right? And that's not necessarily happy. Sometimes happiness can come out of that on occasion, but sometimes so can sadness, and so can, remorse and regret and every other emotion under the book. But underneath it all, I think there's this level of, am I okay with who I am? And what I've seen a lot of friends that are just not okay with who they are. And I think it's because they stayed in that trauma, and it became their identity more than just a stop along the way of their journey,
It is true.
Yeah.
It's so easy in life to get stuck at some stage. As a child, I recognized that some of the adults around me had not changed probably in decades. I mean, longer than I had been alive. And that terrified me a bit. I thought I want to see that happen to me. And I have to say, I don't guess it has in some way. But I don't, I don't know, even fundamentalist Christianity, which is what I know best, and I think we all know best here, is there's no commandment to be at peace with yourself. Yeah. God doesn't seem to care about you being at peace with yourself in the Bible. And, I don't think that not being at peace with yourself should make you feel like you're not doing the thing. But I'm not so interested in the commandments either. It comes out to it. And God had this great analogy about a scientist who comes to an experiment with a closed mind. And I have an alternative here. A guy named Hoffman I think he was working for Sandoz Labs in Europe, and he says he was trying to isolate different substances from argot, which is a mold that grows on grain. And one day he didn't feel so well, so he just went home, got on his bicycle, went home, and on the way home, he tripped balls. He was just tripped balls, although nobody had said that before because nobody had ever tasted LSD before. But he had just discovered it.
Yeah.
And he went home and he lay on a couch and he just cycles of visions and, and experiences. But he, being a scientist, said, where somebody else might have said, I came home from work and I saw God. He said, there must have been something I touched. And he'd been in the lab, the protocols, I don't know if they were wearing gloves in those days, but the protocols were in place. He's not supposed to be ingesting any of this stuff. He's just analyzing it. He said, I must have touched something, and it must have been very small amounts. And he discovered LSD.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people that have the same experience of God in the Bible, that they almost say the same thing. I must have touched something.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's something bigger and greater than yourself, right? And
yeah.
I mean, there's a strong argument to be made that a lot of our ideas of spirituality and unity in divinity and that come from ancestors partaking in these things and not understanding.
I think it's natural for human beings. I think that in the mental state, people can reach mental states without drugs. I mean, just by accident. It could be exposure to a chemical. But it can be stress or lack of sleep. I remember once experimenting I had already been awake for 48 hours, so I thought, well, I'll just see how long I can go. The praying hands, the praying hands, they came to me and they did like magic tricks. And I was awake. Some people passed through the room and I, acknowledged them. But I was, all the way at the edge of something. So I mean, it's a natural part of the human brain. We can all have these experiences. Yeah, that doesn't mean they're valueless either.
No, and that's one of the reasons why they historically have been such a big part of so many different spiritual practices or religious belief systems. I mean, whether you're talking about sweats, indigenous sweats, or substances, mushrooms, or fasting, or asceticism, where I in some way abuse my body in a certain way that, all of these things take us into a sort of, or potentially can take us into a different sort of consciousness or reality.
Anger wears a borrowed uniform, changes teams but keeps the war. Same old cage with different colors, same locked ideological door. Trauma breaks with interrogation, guidance till they look the same. Bias dressed in lab coat language, still can't read beyond its frame. But a scientist on a bicycle said something's on my skin. Not I saw God descending, just let me trace where this begins. There must have been something I touched, something small that shook the frame. Not every vision is instruction, but they're not empty all the same. We can fall through sleepless doorways, meet ourselves unmade, still return with open hands and say that mattered, I was changed. That mattered, I was changed. Mattered, I was sweat lodge fast in breaking silence, music swelling like a tide, altered states on all deception. Sometimes they pull back the sky. Don't crown it, don't erase it. Let the moment stand. Call it rain, call it spirit. Either way, I
I think the challenge is in our Western, and maybe I don't want to get us off track, but I feel like in
What
our
track?
Western, I'm trying to get us on a track maybe.
Okay.
Our Western Western religious mind, and I say that I'm painting with a really broad brush, but
It's hard
it
to
has
see
been,
the Western mind. We are
no, I know,
inside of it.
but in modern times, post-modernity, okay, no, not post, but modernity, we'll put it there. We are so rational about things. I mean, it has only been the last couple of hundred years, I think.
The Enlightenment, yes.
The Enlightenment, that Christianity has been all about building arguments and proof. And I'm not saying that we're no theologians who were building arguments, but nobody had anything to build them with when you didn't have the Bible. Okay. I mean, most people had not seen the Bible. All they knew about Bible stories was some paintings and maybe a yearly kind of cart that came through and did a little play for them. But the bottom line is we got to a place where we took this very pseudo-scientific approach to God, where suddenly now many people ask of the Bible that it be not a book of spirituality or wisdom teaching, but also a book of science. It's got to be 100% scientifically right, and if you don't believe that, then you're a heretic or whatever. And that's a very recent thing. In the past, it was very understandable that, for instance, language that was apocalyptic probably had a meaning beyond the very literal. And so, but it seems like we live in a time where religion, at least American Christianity, likes to argue a whole lot about those sorts of details. And many people are hungering for experience, and so they're running toward experience however they can get it, which in some cases might be substances, but it's also what I would call hyper emotionalism fueled by music, to be frank. I think that's a huge piece of the evangelical culture. I think, and I've dabbled into that. I went and visited a friend in Colorado who was a worship leader for a long time and still is. I played instruments, so I said, "Hey, yeah, I'll get up on stage." And I still grapple with what that's all about, because frankly, making music and making art is a very spiritual thing for me.
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure how it fit with the delivery of an evangelistic.
Tell us about the experience. What was it like being on stage there? What was it like being on stage there? Tell us about the experience. Did you feel like?
Yeah, that's what
I feel. People responding to your music.
I did, sure, I did. But that's and it was nice. But there was also embedded in the performance of the music the occasional, very emotionally stilted plea for certain types of responses. And there's also, not from me, from the folks in the outside.
No, for money? Were they asking for money?
Not
so they
no,
wanted
but
a certain kind of. They're just trying to manipulate the audience emotionally.
Well, that's what it felt like to me. I don't want to be purely judgmental, but yeah, and some of it fits with the belief system. I mean, I remember distinctly. And I was playing mandolin, and it was a lovely little ditty I was doing as a solo thing. It was beautiful. I was up there, and a lady moved out into the aisle on all fours and started barking at me like a dog. And I thought, wow, this is new. I've never had that. That's not the kind of church I went to.
No, it's not.
It meant a lot to her.
Yeah.
But that is the sort of thing that then takes me to a place where I say, I can understand this. I'm not sure what it has to do with God, and I'm really not sure what it has to do with the theological sorts of manipulation to judge or to vote in a certain way or to
I see.
Moral judgments about folks.
Right.
Or my team
yes.
wears this color and does this thing.
Yeah,
and if you're not, then you're not part of God's team.
It stays very surface level. I'm a big fan of depth, and I think a lot of, especially evangelical Christianity in the West, there's a certain level of, fundamentalism itself, you could argue, is all based on fear, right? It's based on things have to go this way. They have to be this exact beliefs, because if they're not, I don't know what I'm going to do if they're not, because this is how I live. So then all of a sudden, if you start to doubt, you start to question, then you start to feel afraid of what's behind that door. So you stay safe in fundamentalism, right? I mean, the defenders of the faith, I just forgot it starts with an A, the people that defend to the point where they're looking at things like a lawyer, right? And they're doing all of the things. They always have an answer. I had friends that did this all the time. And it's like, there's a big argument to be made that they're the ones that doubt the most, and then but when you have, and it's funny because you look at where Christianity has gone in the last 40 years, let's say, for example, and you look at where society's at. And from my perspective, I see this very interesting parallel of what I was struggling with in my 20s in fundamentalist Christianity. It's like here 20 years later, it's almost like it's broken out into the culture at large. Like we see fundamentalism. Yeah, we see fundamentalism in culture, not just in Christianity all the time. When they were on the right, or people I know on the right, and where they have the same. There's excommunication. Well, now we call it cancellation. There's, you have to agree and say these words, say these things. People have to, and it's like, well, that's what fundamentalism was from my perspective. Like I had to believe the right things, do the right things, say the right things. And then here on the flip side, I see that same thing happening, which is interesting that now it's happening, a lot of it's happening from the other side, at least culturally. It's just funny how things go in circles, I think. And that's another thing that comes back to that foundational belief that goes through time. When we talked about people, what were they years ago when they took some of those mushrooms or whatever they were taking and they thought they saw God, right? Like there's these things that happen in society that just keep happening no matter what era you're in. And they're all the same. That under all of it, it's the same system running. You just paint a different paint color on it and you say it's something new and better, but really, like I saw a lot of my fundamentalist friends leave the church but not leave that system or that way of thinking. So they just found another team that was the exact opposite of what they were on, but the thinking system is the problem. It's this, you need to fix that. You're just changing teams, but you're still doing the same thing, Right. And I think that's where it's tough because, when you feel like you're at a place where you've actually done the work and healed, right? And then you see people that you care about that feel like they got stuck in that anger mode that you have to go through. It's really tough to know how to talk to them because they're just as fundamental as they were when we were together preaching Jesus, Yeah. But now it's like if I bring anything up, man, it's like, whoa, it's like I was in church again and I said, hey, I'm not sure if I believe in Jesus. And boom, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's scary right now for me is wondering, where do people like that really think through things and independent thinkers like such as yourself, Scott, Mark, I'm sure I just met you, but it's like, where do people like us go when we're trying to fix the groundwork thinking behind us ourselves, not trying to join another team, we're actually trying to heal,
We built a ladder out of argument, measured heaven rung by rung, asked the sacred to be rational, proof on every tongue. But hunger doesn't live in logic, it's a deeper kind of need. So we spark the lights and swell the sound and tell the room what to believe. Men lean in trembling hands, a simple melody. The air grew thick with expectation, waiting to be free. Someone crawled into the aisle, barking praise in broken time. A human heart laid open wide, mistaken search for a sign. Where does God end? Where does performance start? When the music pulls the lever on the fragile human heart. But doubt's the point. the cage is painted holy, it's still a cage inside the hymn. I'm looking for a deeper room where love is not a trick to win.
And I don't know if Christianity has really equipped anyone for that in the last 40 years. It's been at that surface. I mean, we read the story of Jonah, and we're talking about whether or not he actually lived in a fish for 3 days. It's like the whole point of the story is God cared about his enemies, and that is why that story was worth preserving, right? Because even your enemies matter to the divine.
Yeah.
But we end up talking about fish. It's like we really missed the point. You know?
Well, but you know what? When I grew up, it was a whale, and whales are like mammals.
Oh, sure.
So it's not even fish. So I mean, you could spend a whole week studying that in a Bible class.
See, I got in trouble for calling it a whale because the Bible says it's a fish. So if you call it, I mean, that's how fundamental people got.
Yeah,
you know,
the Bible clearly does not know about whales. I mean, it has Leviathan. That's all it's got.
Yeah.
I would say, I still harbor, I think I make an excellent comic book, but I still harbor the desire to create a visual story, a story of Jonah meeting Pinocchio.
Yeah.
They both get swallowed.
Those got crossed in my head when I was young. I somehow got the Jonah story and the Pinocchio story all mixed up.
It makes perfect sense
because of the whales, because the big fish in there. So yeah. That's.
I mean, they have the same trajectory in some, at this point in their lives. Right. I have to say, well, in fact, I just told this to a bunch of students of mine. I teach in a local, I call it a ancient shade-strewn college, like those that dot Pennsylvania. It is in Pennsylvania. But I never told this story to students, but we were doing world building. I teach video game design. And we were talking about world building. And anyway, I was once asked by a youth pastor or teacher of some kind in a setting with young people. We were talking about Jonah, and we're kind of we turned the lights out. We're trying to imagine being inside a fish. And he says, what do you, it wasn't in complete dark by any means. He said, what do you take with you? You can take one thing with you. What do you take with you into the fish? And some students had a Bible, and the guy says, you can't read, too dark to read inside a fish. And I thought that was very funny, kind of a Groucho Marx kind of remark. But he says, so what do you take? And I said, I would take an exit. And he says, well, that's not, it's not a real thing. You can't take an exit. I said, then I'd take a revolver. And that was the end of that whole bit.
Yeah.
I do think what we're talking about here is, look, the human condition is such that it doesn't fit well into fundamentalisms.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentalism has got to be about excluding. And you're right. There are people all over. It's not right and left. It's many dimensions.
Sure.
There are people just excluding everyone else outside of their little package, the little hexagon that they've chosen. And that all I know is that the teaching of Christ says the prostitutes are welcome, the tax collectors are welcome, the people who work for the government, the oppressive government are welcome, children are welcome, simple people, knowledgeable people. That's the opposite of fundamentalism. It's not excluding anyone, except he's ready to exclude the people who want to exclude. He says to the Pharisees, they pile burdens on you and won't lift a finger to help.
Yeah.
They want to exclude people from the kingdom, but his kingdom is open to anyone at any moment. He says it's among you, and I think he means it's between you.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God is it emerges when you turn to each other with a looking for the divine inside each other and willing to love that. Suddenly it leaps into 3 dimensions, the kingdom of God.
I think
God is an act, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea that as you act, you would experience God, and you would see the kingdom of God and in the actions that you perform with one another. It's not so much a place, or it's not so much a person, but it's the process of becoming.
He says, wherever 2 or more of you are gathered together in my name, I am there.
Yeah.
And so what he's suggesting is that that he's a hologram, that we can project. We can see, if I see Christ in you and you see Christ in me, then Christ is here.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's suggesting.
I think the challenge that makes fundamentalism anathema to being human in a healthy way is that all of these realizations depend on something. They depend on our capacity to learn, which depends on our capacity to change. And what fundamentalism bottom line says is, you've got it. It can't change. It has to stay. Being faithful is holding tighter onto this, not opening up. And this is what Pete Rollins was talking about. Doubt is not a thing to run away from. It's a thing to grab onto and to say, hey, I have some doubt here. Let me ask the questions. Let me reject what I need to reject for a time. I'm not going to reject it utterly, because that would be another kind of fundamentalism. I'm going to reject it right now and look deeper and take it back if I need it, or leave it gone if I don't. And there are theologies that most fall under the category of fundamentalism. I think there are other theologies that may not fit in that category, and are bad for other reasons. But the problem with fundamentalist theology is that it has built for itself a cage that you cannot get out of. If you say, well, this doesn't make sense, well, the wisdom of God is far above the wisdom of man. Don't rely on your own wisdom. If I say that feels unloving, well, feeling is not what this is about. Doing God's will, obedience is what this is about. And those fundamentalist theologies cause people to not be able to escape with the senses that God gave them. God gave us things so we can see. I can see other people. I can be empathetic for other people.
Give us minds to think.
But
hearts to feel. Right.
But if my theology has cut me off from that, then I have succeeded in not being able to see other human beings, to be empathetic for them, to have a heart for them, or to even recognize what my senses are telling me about the world around me.
Yeah, and then it's absolutely a cage. I think that's probably the best way to describe it, because you box yourself in and you leave no room for any type of, stretching out and saying, wait, let me see what happens if I do this. Let me see what happens if I do that. And I think what happens a lot of times, especially in deconstruction, is people leave that cage just to jump into another. I mean, there's people that make a living online just making, posts against Christianity. And it's like your entire identity now is wrapped up in just hating the thing that you tried to get away from. And yet you're still so tied to it just from the other side. Like if Christianity disappeared tomorrow, what would you do? What would you hate? You wouldn't know what to do with yourself. And I think like that's the struggle that I have with is it's not about just leaving the cage. It's about leaving all cages, leaving that mental model of having everything figured out and I'm right. You have to believe these things. You have to do these things. You have to say these things. We changed the mantras, but it's all the same thing. In church, it was, you need to pray harder. You need to pray, now it's, you need to educate yourself, for example. It's the same type of concept, and we do all of that. We shift the language. We find a new Satan to hate, whatever it is, but we're still doing the same thing. And it's like, man, there's value in recognizing the nuance of life, that sometimes things are horrid in life and sometimes they're not. And sometimes those things can be part of the same thing at the same time. And you just have to be able to understand that a little bit. And I think that's where you get the message of Jesus, where he says all are welcome, is because you have the sense of, every single person on the planet, no matter what your background, no matter what your ideology, no matter what your view, you are all welcome. But he also says getting here is like trying to thread a needle, because it's not like a thing where you can just, I'm going to believe this now, because that's what fundamentalists do. What he's saying, I think, is more about like, how are you going to choose to live when you come across people that disagree with you or that differ from you? Or how are you going to choose who are you when the road gets rough? Do you bounce back, or do you keep letting it make you bitter and hollow? And I think seeing this as a way of life instead of this belief system I think it opens everything up because you're no longer worried about, do I believe the right things? What you're doing is, hey, I did this today. How did that make me feel? I didn't like the way that made me feel. I should probably do something about that. And the more you do that, I think the more you follow that path, you find how freeing it really is. And it's something that I think everybody has the opportunity to do, but a lot of people get stuck. And politics love power. The rich love greed. Whatever you pick the sin, they can all do it, right? We've all done it in that, but the challenge is to take those off of their mantle and, put yourself in the right path forward. And that's a tough thing to do. It's not something that is easy. And that's where the challenge of depth, I think, comes in, because we have, for so long, Christianity has taught people this shallow version of what it means to follow Jesus, that when you say something like this and you're talking about this difficult process, that is way down in the depths of who you are as a person. Most people don't even understand what you're trying to say.
Well, yeah,
Inside the fish, it's story dark. No page can hold the light. Arguelles and ancient margins miss the mercy in the night. Enemies and none of our matter. That's the story worth the flame. But we fight about the biology and forget the bigger name. Tax collectors, broken people, and children at the door. The only ones he pushed against were the ones who shut it more. The kingdom isn't over there, it's among you, it's between. When I look for God inside you, the room turns living green. It leaps into dimension when we choose each other's good. God is not a place you reach for, God is what you do. Gather two or more in mercy. Watch the hidden image start. If I see the Christ within you, then he's present in this part. The kingdom isn't far away, it's rising where we stand, in the space between forgiveness and an outstretched hand. It leaps to dimension when we choose each other's good. God is not a place you reach for. God is what you do.
I think that's, and Mark and I've talked about this before, being born again really is about a transformative thing that happens. And that is drastically different than a transactional thing that happens. The version that I grew up in was there was a sin problem. There's a very mechanical, mathematical kind of way to get rid of
very
that.
much.
And so we
an
take care
equation.
of that. We follow the equation, and then I get to go to heaven after I'm dead. Being born again simply was flattened out to, I did the right equation, so when I die, I get to go to heaven. And the reality was that everything that Jesus did and said was clearly about transformation. It was about seeing differently. It was about being differently. It was not about fulfilling a certain thing so you get a prize at the end. And I think when Christianity, Christianity is a human thing. It is a human thing that was created in response, probably, to the teachings of Jesus, but that's what humans do. That's what we do with stuff like that. We turn it transactional because of all the things that you mentioned, the power, money, greed, whatever. And we see, hey, this is a game I can play, because if I'm Rome, this helps me. If I'm if I'm president of the United States, I can use that. If I'm whatever it is, if I'm a TV evangelist, I can make that work. I can fill the coffers. And so what's lost is that transformational piece.
Well, and it's crazy because we always want to put things into a system. For some reason, we have to do. And I think when you see Jesus say it's or the Bible say it is for freedom that Christ has set you free, right? It's not to get out of that cage and go into something else. It's to be truly free. Mm. And I mean, this is coming from a guy that lives my professional life, and several of my jobs is building structured systems that make things simple, right? Mm. But when it comes to spirituality, there's foundational principles, but there's no belief system. At least for me, it's not I can point to this and say, oh, that's what I believe. I can say, well, it's kind of like that. Sometimes things are closer than others, but it's not a structured, point, here's the bullet points of what Heath believes kind of thing. It's like, no, this is something that's a bit deeper than a system. It's a man, I don't know what I'd call it. It's something far, far deeper that I can't even put words to, but it's something where, we all, for whatever reason, we think that, being a Christian or having faith or not having faith, it means, well, this means I believe these things, or, I mean, politics is a great example. If you're Republican or Democrat, then you pretty much know what you believe on each side. It's like, well, that's not the case for most people. Yeah. Most people have very nuanced ideas and they're open to hearing other ideas and open to discussing, open to learning, open to being proven wrong and changing their systems of belief, because they're like, you know what? I thought that and I was proven it was wrong. So I changed.
Here's an idea I hope you guys will be open to. It actually sparked by just an offhand remark Scott made quite a while back, but I've been thinking about it ever since. Now just tell me I'm wrong here. I think we're suffering, the whole world is suffering from a whole bunch, and it's not just the big three, the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. I did them in the wrong order. Judaism by far the oldest.
Yeah, by far.
I think maybe we're suffering from monotheism. Once you have monotheism, you have people saying, yeah, but not that God, it's this one. And that breaks down into Catholics and Protestants and 150,000 kinds of Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe God needs a wife. We should maybe just try to get another God in there. Because the minute you have
the Hindus have that covered.
The minute you got a couple of different gods, people go, I mean, I worship, Zeus. And somebody goes, I worship Apollo. And you go, okay, yeah, whatever. You worship that guy. That's fine. I mean, I'm not for it, but I'm not against it. He does exist. I think we would all be better off. The whole planet would be better off if we were just a little bit more Hindu. Thoughts?
I mean, there's something to be said, though, just if you look through history, the unifying factor that happened in culture with monotheism. I mean, it did stop a lot of tribal warfare because everyone kind of fell under
monotheism. We don't have religious.
No, I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying we don't have it, but you look at where we are look where monotheism has taken us as a society. It's certainly, I would say,
it brought us to where we're at, and I'm kind of ready to try something different.
Well, maybe. I don't know if I'm there yet, but
monotheism.
We'll see. Yeah. I think there's something to be said about unity.
I think we could do it. We could say, in fact, I heard a guy say this. He was talking about Christianity, and he was not a Christian, but he was a kind of almost like a stand-up theologian, as it were. He's kind of a comic, but he said, we got the Father and the Son. Where's the Mother? Well, she died. She's a ghost. The Holy Ghost is the dead mother. I think if we just bring back the mother, we'd all be better off. And we'd all be better off. We could say, I worship Sophia.
Yeah, Sophia, the Hebrew term for the spirit is definitely female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, female. Right. I worship Sophia. You guys, I mean, I'm not saying you guys shouldn't worship that guy with 4 initials that you're not supposed to say out loud, or Jesus, right? But I mean, I'm for Sophia. I'm on Team Sophia, and then we could all. There's one big happy family. All I know is monotheism probably was good for the sciences, right? But it's not good anymore. I'm sick of it. Let's do it. Try it without it.
I think you might be looking at it a bit narrow, though, because I mean, if part of the value of monotheism is you can build a culture up that's all kind of heading with one foundational direction. Like if you
a fundamental, no.
Not foundational, not fundamental. I think those are 2 separate things.
Okay.
But I think like if you split everyone up to just start pursuing their own paths, eventually that's how you break society apart and everything kind of crumbles because everyone starts running away from each other.
India's been hanging in there a long time.
What's that?
India. They've been hanging in there a long time.
They absolutely have. But there's something to be, but you're talking about global rejection of monotheism, right?
I'm just talking about, I'm ready to do it myself is what I'm saying. And
I see.
I'm ready to recruit others.
I think part of
what I'm saying.
I think part of the deal is, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but part of it is what you're suggesting is that the idea of monotheism quite often, combined with fear, which it quite often has been.
In genders, yeah.
And gender.
But I mean,
causes me.
Engenders.
Monotheism engenders fear. It's combined with gender too.
I'm taking that back. I think everyone understands fear. I don't think fear is caused by monotheism.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when I'm fearfully monotheistic, I have a real strong reason to say, if you're not monotheistic in the same way that I am, then there's a real problem. So part of this is, am I capable of saying love in any other name is love? And if I'm able to say God is love, I can either say, okay, you guys don't have love because you don't have Jehovah or Jesus, or I can say, you guys have discovered love. You've discovered God. You've discovered, and there's a because those interpretive lines work both ways. They can make a keyhole that nobody can fit through, or they can be interpreted. No one comes to the Father but by me. That can mean one of 2 things. It can mean if you don't have the Jesus name on your shirt, you ain't getting there.
Right.
Or it can mean anyone who has found God. You've found me.
Yeah, I mean, love. I mean, so if that's an argument for monotheism, and monotheism is everyone chooses to believe in love, then I'm all about that. Like whatever you want to call, you could say brand, you could say whatever, but I mean, I know Brahmin people that are far more quote unquote Christian than Christians I know because of how they're acting.
Right? I don't know if they feel complimented by that.
They probably wouldn't. But when you're looking at what
say about them,
but when you're try to argue,
you're the whitest black man I've ever met. It doesn't seem
exactly
like much
right.
of a compliment.
I mean, I should have introduced you to some of my friends in college, but I mean, there's that level, like with Scott, what you were getting at is, so if you underneath all of the branding, let's call it that, of religions,
branding,
the thing we're looking for, that ground of being, we would call love. And that, wherever that is found, wherever truth is found, that is what we're saying. We found the same thing. And so I think that to me is like, you can, underneath all of the different things that people find and do, I think there's still this mono ground that we all stand on. And I think it's love. I think that's probably the best expression we have for what that is that sustains us. Because when you don't love, I mean, you feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's absolutely true that all human existence is predicated on love. Without love, none of us would be here.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been born, and we wouldn't have lived. Yeah.
So I'm gonna push this cart in a direction one more time. That's heavy-handed, isn't it? I'm gonna push this cart in a direction.
I just totally took it off in a whole different direction, at right angles.
That's fine.
I had no agenda. I had no agenda. I was just going to answer where you guys took me. So
we're taking you all over the place, and now we're taking a cart. At the
It's dark
risk,
now.
at the risk of turning this into a very well known and very discussed Paul McCartney song,
Oh God.
"Songs of Love," I do want to bring in music.
Okay.
So,
yes.
What was that song? A Silly Little Love Songs? What?
Oh God.
Yeah, you know that one where he said
Yes,
everybody
I
was
do know
making
the
fun of
song,
him.
yes.
Yeah.
Who wants
anyway.
to fill the world with silly love songs?
Yeah, I don't want to. Well, that's not what I want to talk about. I do want to
thank God.
ask. I do want to ask because all three of us are
Musician.
songwriters and artists and musicians. I would like to ask about your connection. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast. What role does that play? Music, but art, anything you want to talk about, creativity, what role does that play in this idea of spirituality, of love, if you want to take it that direction, of healing in this certainly a trauma-infested sort of existence we have?
I don't know about, you're asking me, huh?
I'm asking anyone who wants to answer.
Well, you said we talked about it before, so I thought maybe, but I will answer. I'll jump in. Okay, so I don't think my art heals anything particularly, and I don't believe in healing the way I think other people. I hear people talk about it. I remember when my best friend died tragically and young. I remember realizing that the day that healing, if you lose an eye, doesn't mean you get the eye back. Healing means the day you wake up and you don't think of yourself as a guy with two eyes.
Yeah.
You're used to it. You're fine with it. It's who you are now. That's healing for a guy who loses an eye. You don't get the eye back. And I don't know that my work is about healing. And it's certainly not in that sense. I don't believe in that healing in that sense. I think healing is just sometimes just getting used to things. But creativity, music, how does that fit into my spiritual life? Well, it is the way in which I most resemble the divine. God is a creator and I'm a creator. And that's one of the reasons I would be very hesitant to, if I met the person who designed the universe, I'd be very hesitant to do anything like bow down. Because I recognize, game knows game. I recognize some of the motifs, you know what I mean? I mean, it's bigger than I can comprehend, but it's not different than what I can comprehend. And so I'm a creator and the divine is a creator and I participate in the divine. I think that the thing inside me that creates is the divine. I don't think there's a difference. I don't think there's a separation. I think that when I'm creating and I'm doing it and it's happening, I think in that moment I am the divine, and it's not like I'm separated from or cast out by. I am there with the divine, and the divine is there with me. It's like I say, it's like the hologram. It's like I'm projecting the divine into my reality, and that's what I think. So that's what I do. That's my thing.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying I'm very good at it. I'm a terrible musician, but that's the point is what's happening internally. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think creating is kind of to use your own words, like if when you are creating, it is the divine doing this, and I mean in that response, the only thing you have is gratitude, really, that you got to be a part of something going on, that you've been creating since existence and you decided to create through you or whatever. But for me, it was interesting. I never anticipated being a songwriter. It wasn't something I ever thought I would do. It kind of happened. I played guitar for a long time and a lot of it happened during those dark years of deconstruction where it was just, I think I needed an outlet of something. I wasn't preaching anymore.
Those are prime songwriting years.
Did that, I don't want to derail you here, but did that play a role in your sorting through that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, there's still songs that I will play every now and then that were completely just me processing through, my faith and things like that. But then a lot of them were just me writing songs that I thought were interesting that people would want to hear. But it was in the act of creating those songs and building that type of, I don't want to call it a career, but I mean, it's part-time career over the year if you look at it. But there's this level of I had to create something and I couldn't create sermons. I couldn't create, what I had been doing in the past. And not because I, wasn't allowed to. Like, I physically was like, this is not who I am anymore.
Yeah.
This is something that, going back to losing the eye, like I lost years of my life, and my healing was recognizing I don't get those back. And that's okay. But who I am now and what I can do now with what I have left and what I've learned from all of those years, that makes me who I am. And who I am is a lot of different things. Songwriter, I got a day job as a demand planner. I run an art center, and I have another nonprofit on the side. I got 5 kids. I mean, I'm a busy guy. There's a lot of aspects to me. But all of that, I think, comes down to just recognizing that I don't get my eye back, and that's okay. And music was a big part of that during those dark. It's really, there's no reason I shouldn't have just fallen into alcoholism or whatever people fall into when they lose their faith. They go through a divorce and they just give up. And music really was something that, hey, I can do this, and I have an outlet to still feel like I am worth something.
You didn't get your eye back, but you got something else.
Yeah. And I'm going to steal that, because that's one of the greatest lessons of healing I think I've ever heard was, healing is recognizing you don't get the eye back.
It's the day it's the day you forget. You wake up and you've totally forgotten. You don't think of yourself. It's now part of you. You don't think about it.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was trying to get to earlier was, if you deconstruct your faith, but you're still angry at the church, then you haven't really healed, because I woke up years ago and just quit really caring what the church thought about me. It doesn't even cross my head anymore if I say something controversial or if I say something that they're going to get upset at. It's it's not a part of my life.
Let me just suggest that you might have been lucky. Maybe you were lucky.
I don't know if luck had anything to do with it. It was pretty hard.
Those people may have not just... They may have just had definitely had different experiences. All I'm saying is, I wouldn't want to blame them.
I don't think I'm trying to. I think what I'm getting at is, for me, it was I had no longer needed to make sure that I measured up to what they thought I should be or who I thought they, all of that stuff. It was just, hey, I don't answer to you, and that to me was just I woke up not even
liberating.
Just completely forgetting that I didn't have another eyeball. Right. The eyeball's gone, and it just wasn't even a part of my thought. Yeah.
Right.
Oh. Yeah. That's freedom.
Yeah, that's freedom.
Well, and I agree with that. And I have to say that, I talk about my own trauma in connection with that, but my trauma, and I'm not one who believes in comparing trauma, but my trauma also.
I'm missing this part of my foot,
Yeah.
But I have a scar right here. It goes all the way down.
We could talk about our scars.
I'm missing the tooth back there.
I think that's a scene from Jaws, isn't it?
Yes, that's
they're down on the boat and they're showing their scars. I'm doing
a bit from Jaws. Yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Anyway, but I do know some folks, who have experienced that trauma in deep, deep ways that I will not understand. In part because they're not male, they're not heterosexual, they're not white. And there is a society and community around that perpetually reminds them
those things.
That what we think about you does matter to you, because it's impacting what you can buy, where you can work, what you can wear, and whether or not you can get health care and everything else in ways that it just hasn't impacted me and probably never will. And so I am able to say, and I have, for the most part, those people who hurt me in ways connected with my religion don't take up space in my head nearly so much as they used to.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think, to go back to the music, that's one of the things that has helped me with that, to be able to express that, to be able to put that down, to be able to have it and say, look, listen to this. And especially to have someone else listen and say, yeah, I know that. Maybe not exactly the same way, but that takes us full circle back around to God is here when 3 or more are gathered. And I think that's what our music can do. It's what art can do. It can be the third thing that brings people together, not just necessarily to appreciate the art or the song, but to say, yeah, I know that, and I can share that, and I can listen to you, and I think that's a big piece of God in the room.
Told me ever like a receipt, an equation neatly solved. Some moved by sacred knife, future safely locked in the vault. But every word the teacher spoke was changed beneath the skin. Not transaction, not a contract, but becoming born again. It isn't rise or afterlife, it's higher to the left. Touching clay, the divine is not above me, it is moving when I play. If you lose an eye, you don't get it back. Healing isn't rewind, it's waking up and forgetting you once were two of mine. I wrote songs in the dark years when sermons wouldn't form. Music kept the pulse alive through doubt and through the storm. For freedom, freedom. Leave the cages where they stand. If we love the ground beneath us, then we're walking holy land. Not certain, not completed, still learning how to see, but alive inside the process, and that's enough for me. And that's enough for me. Music lives on the edge of failure, risking beauty, risking wrong. I'd rather chase the living question than live inside a finished
So I think we're kind of at the end, and we have a
Okay.
tradition. We have a tradition here. And Mark, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's my turn.
I think it is your turn.
It
So
is.
Scott, what kind of music? What kind of music and and I don't mean genre. I mean, like, what do you hear musically from this conversation about music and love and healing and the divine?
It's really hard because I had something in mind, and I'm just not so sure that it's where I want to go with this. But I am going
Disco.
to.
You were going to go disco. I'm just guessing you were going to say disco.
No, I wasn't going to say disco.
I just guessing. I thought you were going to say
But you
disco.
know what?
Sorry.
We did talk about disco
We
in the
have
last
talked about
episode.
disco.
As I recall, we did talk about disco.
Yes.
Yeah, we did. Here's what I'm going to suggest.
Okay. Yes.
And this may be a disaster. Okay.
We'll see.
I'm gonna suggest some good old prog rock.
Wow.
Some good old prog rock.
Yeah,
When I was younger,
right.
and it can go several directions.
Yeah.
I loved Rush. In fact, I'm going to go with my brother to see Rush
Oh,
in
fantastic.
Fort Worth. Yeah. I mean, Neil Peart is dead,
Of course.
but my goodness, there's a young woman who's playing drums who's amazing.
Is that right?
There she is. There's some Pink Floyd. There's some Yes. There's some Kansas. You can lean a little bit toward that folky acoustic prog rock, and then you can lead heavily into the other stuff. So that's where I'm going, and we'll see. It may be a disaster.
It might be,
but we'll find out.
I think that is kind of the prog is always it's always possible to be terrible.
It is. And you know that someone's going to hate it. So that's okay.
I don't know about that.
Someone always hates prog rock.
Someone's going to hate it.
Well, before we wrap it all up, though, I want to invite Heath. Do you have any last things you want to say, especially if you have something you want to tell us about or promote, to plug, anything that's exciting that's going on?
Yeah.
I've got a lot exciting going on right now. I mean, when does this come out?
We don't know for sure.
Okay.
Sometime in March.
It'll be long after Lent.
Yeah.
It will be.
Yeah. I'm usually playing gigs a couple times a month, usually at the Saloon 10 in Deadwood or at the pub or at Crow Peak here in Spearfish, playing those a lot. I've got some, cool stuff coming up with the Queen City Songwriters Invitational coming up this September, so pay attention to that. We're working on getting that started right now for this year. I'm starting a consulting company, so there's another thing I'm adding to my plate. Turns out I'm really good at workflow automation and streamlining.
Awesome.
I've been doing it for years. And
do you have a name for your company?
Right now, it's just me, but I'm toying between groundwork. It goes back to that foundational stuff. Fix the foundation first, and everything can flow from there. It's kind of a running theme in my life. But
awesome.
But yeah, it's something that I'm, bringing at the Matthews this past year. I just realized that there's a lot of smaller nonprofits that could use a lot of help that I've been doing in the corporate world for a long time. And
may I suggest for a name for a company that's going to help small nonprofits? Right now, it's just me.
Just me?
Just me?
Right now, it's just me.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a great.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes, but I figured it's worth a shot.
That sounds great. We didn't even get to talk AI. We were going to talk AI too, but hey.
We'll do that maybe next time you come on the show.
That's right.
Yeah, let's do that next time.
That's right.
Do an AI chat.
Hey, thanks, Heath. Thanks, Mark. Next time.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Mark, nice to meet you virtually.
Glad to meet you too, Heath.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, we'll talk soon.
All right. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one and hear a few more songs, just subscribe to Faith Fulcrum on your favorite podcast platform or go to faithfulcrum.com, where you'll find all of our first season episodes and every episode yet to come. This has been Faith Fulcrum.
Anger wears a borrowed uniform, changes teams but keeps the war. Same old cage with different colors, same locked ideological